Welcome to Section 5 of ITIL4 Strategist Direct Plan and Improve Certification Training Program. Section 5 is about know how to use Organizational Change Management or OCM. Specifically, understand the nature, scope, and potential benefits of Organizational Change Management or OCM. Know how to use the key principles and methods of communication and OCM, meaning identify and manage different types of stakeholders, effectively communicate with and influence others, establish effective feedback channels, and lastly, know how to establish effective interfaces across the value chain. Firstly, the nature, scope, and benefits of OCM. I will be using the term OCM to identify organizational change management. OCM and DPI, direction, planning, improvement, that is. So how does OCM relate to direction? When you direct employees, you need them to change behavior. How is OCM relevant to planning? When making any plan, you need to consider the people aspects. Even in routine day-to-day planning, you need to consider people. Lastly, how does OCM connect with improvement? Cannot make improvements without OCM. Understand involvement of each stakeholder group. Encourage collaboration early in each improvement and at critical decisions. In particular, significant improvements really require the organizational change management. Small improvements could be done with slight changes. So the OCM intervention, small improvements. Let's go and see more about it. Nature, scope, and benefits of OCM. Resistance to change. The biggest reason people resist change is fear of the unknown. One key thing about change management for the organization is people may resist it. They may be okay to do things which are comfortable to them, but resist other things, particularly when they have to change their behavior. There will always be some resistance to any change. The primary function of the OCM practice is managing this resistance. Most people resist change because they prefer the known to the unknown. People accept change when risk of staying is greater than changing. Meaning people accept the change when they find it okay to do so. If people don't understand the change, they will resist it. Change initiatives and impact should be transparent as possible. Otherwise, inaccurate rumors will spread. If people have to speculate, they are more likely to resist the change. Change resistance can be positive. Example, offering a better solution, and such people with this mindset should be involved more formally in the change, meaning there may be some people who might bring up some conflicting or different ideas about why this change will not work. And that can be healthy because those people should be brought in the change initiative because they are thinking harder, analyzing more deeply, and may bring in valuable ideas to do the change. Therefore, in general, changes may fail, and embedding those changes in the longer term could become more challenging because people are used to old ways of working. And so it brings them out of the comfort zone. Time to reflect on some of the brief learning so far and to make a note of any other literature you may want to refer to, like organizational interventions and so on. Nature, scope, and benefits of OCM, Organization Change Management. Identifying change resistance. Provide safe feedback channels like email, social media, and surveys, etc. Whenever there's a change, feedback channels should be available for people to clarify their or ask their questions or ask for clarifications or to remove their anxiety about the change. Listen to objections both formally and informally. There may be informal sessions without any structure to listen to employee concerns. On the other hand, there may be formal workshops to present the change and ask for questions at different points in time. Also ask line managers and sponsors where resistance is coming from. They may know that resistance is coming from certain pockets, from certain technology areas, or from certain service management areas. Ask questions like, do you know why we are making this change? Do you support the change? Do you have the training and support you need? So the questions have to be preempted so that the employees also understand that the management has a concern for them. Observe behavior and identify people who find it hard to transition. There may be genuine reasons for some people not to change. They might have worked for several years in an organization and they're used to certain practices, procedures, etc. And they may be experts in those areas. And they may have anxiety that if things are changing, then certain proven things would fail. Conduct workshops game-based to demonstrate value and need for change. Some group-based games with some prototypes and activities can be conducted to show the why changes are required. For example, some real-world data may be brought up and asked for analysis and for people to decide what could be done in this situation, and they themselves will understand why they need to change. Analyze attitudes, behaviors, and culture, ABC, to identify what sustains current behavior. ABC is a more wider term. The ABC analysis is beyond the syllabus of this course, but it comes from the field of organizational behavior management, or OBM. It's about, it focuses on the consequences of not changing and the consequences of changing oneself and others. And in summary, if you look at it, it's about the consequences are more effective in changing behavior than the triggers which lead to a behavior. So if I'm doing something and I see the output of that, so for example, if somebody exercises and they see the result of that, then they may be more inclined towards exercise. But if they don't see the results, they will stop exercising. Rather than a trigger which might be, if you exercise, then the following will happen. That may not be so useful in changing the behavior. Yeah. So it's all individualistic sometimes, the consequences to oneself and the others which can change the behavior. And in general, people generally want to look at two consequences that increase behaviors. And these are, I get something what I wanted, and I don't get what I don't want, then I will change. Then I think that, yeah, this is good. On the other hand, if the consequences are that I will get something which I didn't expect and I don't want it, and also I'm not getting what I really want, then I will have a different approach. So these are some of the things which come under the ABC analysis, which is also known as antecedent behavior consequences model. But anyway, that's outside the scope of this OCM discussion here, but nevertheless very interesting in case you would like to more about it and know more about it. We have given a reference here in our other material, supporting materials. And if you look at it here, ABC model, you might find some information here in more detail. Going further, various tactics are available to help manage change resistance. For example, deliver targeted communication that addresses concerns. These may be email communications or specific meetings, group meetings with the specific The concerns may be captured beforehand, and the messages may be sent for those concerns. And they could be FAQ, a website with an FAQ, frequently asked questions, or a meeting, FAQ meeting. But they should be easily available and up to date. Therefore, some kind of a repository or a web portal is suggested here. And making people aware about the change. Why is the change happening? What is the benefit? What could be some of the challenges? To be very genuine, some of the challenges should also be highlighted, but then support systems should be communicated to the staff that because of the following support systems, these challenges are easily overcome. Involves employees in the improvement. Employees need to be involved. It's not a hierarchical or bureaucratic command structure. The more the employees are involved, the more likely the change can happen. Sometimes organizations have gone to from waterfall to agile approaches just because somebody told them or they read somewhere that agile is wonderful and they have tried it and failed afterwards. Maybe because it is not just about the software department doing agile, but the entire organization has to be agile. So how do we make the non-software departments understand the benefit of agile? For example, HR, sales, marketing, and finance, and so on. They need to be involved and involved when going agile. So everybody together can collectively work as a small team in the beginning and try to do something agile and see the benefit. And then each of those department people will get convinced that yes, agile is good. And then they can start, there is motivation and they can start doing it further and expand it. Be transparent. Use storytelling, anecdotes of success from other areas. Prioritize improvements to combat change fatigue, meaning too much changes can be stressful. Therefore, there could be done in steps and the highest priorities could be done first, or maybe early wins should be done first. Provide sponsors and managers with messaging and engagement tools so that people's feedback can be obtained easily and at the same time communications can be done easily to others. Leverage quick wins, as I just mentioned, so that it creates a motivation for additional wins afterwards. Create a sense of urgency in stakeholders. This can be important because and can be difficult also. So there may be some change agents who keep the people motivated and continue to market the successes, which can create even more sense of urgency so that when a certain break-even point is reached, the employees may realize that the sooner they do this, the better for them, the more benefit for them. Nature, scope, and benefits of OCM. Reinforcement ensures people don't revert to old ways of working. It's also important the old way of working are not done. New ways should be established, and the old ways of working should be removed. Maybe like old systems, old procedures should etc. be removed. Feedback and metrics determine what actions are needed. Solicited feedbacks in meetings, surveys, social media, intranet, informal discussions, etc. These are good channels for feedback. Managers' opinions about employee attitudes. Managers may look at employees' attitudes. If people are not cooperating just because they don't want to cooperate, sometimes it may happen that people may know the benefits of change, but they don't want to cooperate, maybe for some other reasons. So that needs to be addressed also. That may be more of a performance issue than a true change resistance. Change curve. Eventually people might change. Initially they will deny the change. Then they get upset, frustrated. Yeah. Then they will start accepting it. And eventually it'll be part of their day-to-day job, well integrated. There may be metrics and performance reports about what benefits have happened and any other motivating stories. Particularly the metrics in terms of what are the benefits, including if it is improving the employee satisfaction, that also can be captured. Continual improvement register. Was the change fit for use and purpose? A reference to the continual improvement register where the change entry was made. And with the justification and the urgency, the duration, and the target to be achieved, that can also be cross-checked for reporting and providing feedback. And also sometimes a continual improvement register, for example, might require collection of test data. For example, if test data is old and that is not good, and the improvement idea could be to get new test data, then there could be a challenge on obtaining new test data. And therefore, an action could be determined on how to collect the test data from another source. Reinforcement actions might include communication is essential for reinforcement. So keep communicating is important. Make it harder to follow old ways of working and easier to follow the new ones. Reward and recognition for people who embrace the change and can use any other resistance management techniques. So I think these two here, making it harder to follow old ways and reward and recognition, can be big boosters to ensure that the change is continuous and gets embedded. We will also look at the organization change management practice afterwards, mainly on the purpose of it and the practice success factors. But right now we will move on to another topic, which is identify and manage stakeholders. A stakeholder is a person or organization that has an interest or involvement in an organization, product, service, practice, or other entity. Sometimes people might think that a stakeholder is just a customer, but it is not so as per this definition. It can be anyone who is involved. Of course, some of them would be important stakeholders. For example, the customer is an important stakeholder, no doubt. Stakeholders in an improvement initiative or a service include anyone who has a vested interest, from staff participants to suppliers, business partners, managers, partners, leaders, and sponsors. Stakeholders can also include customers, users, and sponsors, internal or external to the service provider organization. If you recollect the principle focus on value, it also tells us that the most important stakeholder is the customer. And same so for collaboration, the principle of collaborate and promote visibility. The most important stakeholder for collaboration is the customer. Identify and manage stakeholders. Need to understand the role of each stakeholder or group. Different stakeholders have different needs. Need to understand their positions and preferred communication channels. Each stakeholder has a different mindset or a persona. So it's important to understand them properly and deal with them in the manner appropriate with them. Groups of stakeholders can be represented with personas. The meaning of a persona is a target customer, is a type of customer really. It's a realistic description, but a fictitious description. It can be a typical target customer or a typical user of a service or a product. Certain affiliation to do things in a certain way, or may belong to a certain group, a business group, or may have certain similar habits. All that can be captured in a persona. There is more about the personas in the other offering, and that is ITIL Specialist drive stakeholder value. To help manage targeted communications, especially if influence relates to the collective rather than individual. So personas are good when we have a group of stakeholders with similar qualities, and then the communication can be targeted for that group. Before we go into the slide, it may be interesting to know that the stakeholder is probably a more modern concept. A lot of research was done around in the late 90s, and then or in the 90s, and then from the year 2000 onwards, stakeholder theories started emerging and started becoming more popular. If you would like to know more about that, you may refer to this website. Stakeholder, who is known as a management guru in stakeholder management, Mr. Edward Freeman. So it is his website. You can see some interesting videos and articles out there. So involving stakeholders is essential. There are some countries, for example, where the communities are very much involved in government decisions. But in some countries, the communities are not so involved in the government's decision, which shows that the difference in which stakeholders are involved in certain matters. Identify and manage stakeholders. For each stakeholder, you need to identify who are they, what interests do they have in the outcome of the work, what is their primary motivation, what information do they need, how do they want to receive information, their preferences, do they like email or do they like verbal information? Yeah. Why do they want that information? Does it help them to make some decisions, or does it they just want to be kept aware about those information? Yeah. How much they can how much are they interested? What is their current opinion of the initiative? Are the opinions based on good information? Who influences their opinions? Are these influences also stakeholders? What will cause them to support the improvement? If they won't support, how can their opposition be managed? Who might be influenced by their opinions? So lots of things, like it can depend on their position, their authority level in the organization, and their interest levels. They may have certain competencies. They may, if they don't support, meaning if they are resistive type of stakeholders, then they need to be made supportive as soon as possible. Therefore, a certain way of working with them could make them supportive. Just as an example, if they have a need for certain detailed information, saying no to them may make them even more resistant. So instead of saying no, we could tell them, you are allowed to get that information, but unfortunately, you may have to get it yourself. We will give you a website where you can pull that information. Are you okay with that? And they may feel satisfied and they may start supporting. Yeah, so these are the things to be kept in mind when different types of stakeholders are being managed. Going further on stakeholders, influential stakeholders need individual personal communication. The important stakeholders, that is, the higher in power and influence, may need more attention. Particularly, the need to communicate with them increases. Opinions of powerful stakeholders can shape an initiative at an early stage. Support from powerful stakeholders can help gain resources for the initiative. Being politically aware in an organization in terms of who are the power centers can be a big use for improvement leaders. Early and frequent communication about the nature and benefits of the initiative will help ensure support. The earlier the stakeholders are involved, the more they will feel included, and the more they will be aware of the happenings, and the more they can contribute. Otherwise, involving them late can maybe lead to surprises, meaning maybe some of the requirements may not be known, and when they are joining late or made aware late, then it may lead to changes to the plans, which is not good. Anticipate resistance and build actions to win support for the plan. Stakeholders are not always the same, though we expect everyone to be supportive. And although the supportive, some of them may be more proactive as well. But it's important not to ignore the negative type of stakeholders who feel threatened. They also need attention. Sometimes people who are supportive can also turn into negative ones just because they're not given importance in spite of their competitiveness. So those things also need to be watched out. Moving on. Next topic is stakeholder mapping within the identify and manage stakeholders. Understand the power and influence of each stakeholder. Anticipate how they might react. Know how to win their support. Identify which stakeholders are most influential. Know how they are likely to respond to the improvement. Divide stakeholders into 4 categories. Well, this is one way to divide into 4 categories. There may be other ways to divide into other categories, less or more categories. The categories could be power influence. You could pick maybe 2 of these 3, power, influence, or impact, and put a 4-quadrant graph. That's why it becomes 4 categories using 2 of these characteristics. And maybe the interest could be taken or the involvement could be considered. Some of them are similar sounding words, but may have a slight difference. Okay. This is a stakeholder map example. On the x-axis, we have interest levels of stakeholders, low to high. On the y-axis, we have the low to high influence, or you may want to keep power or authority also, some similar terms here. So it tells us some stakeholders who have high interest and influence may have to be managed closely. These are the more important ones, the most important ones. On the other hand, we have some of the less interested, less influencing ones. They need to be observed, watched, not too much attention on them, though they will be useful in the initiative. On the other hand, there are some who are high interest, but less in the power and authority, or less influence at least. Then they need to be kept informed, meaning about the progress. To give more meaning to their work, they may want to know what are the other plans, what is the big picture, and what is the status of ongoing work. They want to know that to maintain their enthusiasm and motivation. And lastly, we have the ones who have high influence, but not really interested on a day-to-day basis in the initiatives. They need to be kept satisfied. Satisfied could mean generally who are highly influencing, but less interested may expect compliance with their procedures, for example. So keeping satisfied, meaning comply with their procedures, otherwise they may get upset. So satisfied their key expectations. If they want to be kept reported about minor cost issues, then that should be done. Therefore, they will be satisfied by doing that. There are many other ways of mapping stakeholders. So if you go to that website, what I showed you, you will find them, like a stakeholder cube and a stakeholder salience model, etc. Apart from the grid method, what we just saw. And the summary is that each of these type of stakeholders needs a different approach. Define a communication plan for each stakeholder group. Each group needs a different way of communication. Some stakeholders might require a simple email message. Some might require a meeting, oral meeting. Others might require a newsletter, periodic newsletter. And sometimes we may have a large group of stakeholders. For example, maybe the high interest, low influence could be a presentation could be given to them once a month, for example. So different methods should be used for different types of stakeholders, particularly for the communications. Communications, therefore, has a very serious influence on stakeholder engagement. Plan the approach for the communication plan, that is. What is the approach? Define what is needed from each stakeholder, identify the message, derive a practical plan to communicate with each stakeholder, keep the best supporters engaged, consider how actions will affect the stakeholders. Some stakeholders may be asking for changes to communication messages. They may ask for changes to what is being reported to them. And if that is practically possible, then fine, can be done. Otherwise, they have to be informed why frequent changes to the reports may not be adding value to anything. But overall, they need to be kept engaged. Particularly the best supporters they need to continue to support. They should not become resistive. How to put the message also. Even sometimes simple things like the grammar, use of grammar in a sentence can also influence the stakeholder. If they are used to maybe active language, then active language would be good instead of a passive language. This step here, define what is needed. It's about understanding their communication needs. Define what is needed from each stakeholder. And sometimes there may be information to be obtained from stakeholders also. We now move on to another topic. Effectively communicate and influence. There are 5 communication principles. Communication is a two-way process. We are all communicating all the time. Timing and frequency matters. There is no single method of communication that suits everyone. The message is in the medium. Let's go and look at each one of them with examples. Communication is a two-way process. It's simple to understand that communication works well when the communication happens both ways. We always need to ensure that our messages are understood. So it's not just sending a message, but also checking from time to time whether those messages are being understood or not. Sometimes we do have receivers who do ask questions in an interactive sessions, but if they are quiet, then we can also ask them questions to ensure that they have understood us. Receiver of a message must also check if it has been understood correctly. This is sometimes known as active listening, where a receiver may ask questions. They may say, I would like to summarize what you said, or I have a question on what you said. It means that they are listening carefully. So receiver of a message also must check that it has been understood correctly. Email with use a variety of methods, formal and informal. Formal and informal. Informal could be, for example, a gossip in a coffee corner could be an informal way. Email with no response is not effective. In general, it's a good idea to put in an email to get back in case of any questions or to acknowledge what was sent. But it may not be possible in every email. Yeah? So, but in general, it's good to, if there is a response on the email, yes, understood, or I have the following questions. So at least there should be an offer from the sender side that if there are any questions to the recipient has, they should feel free to write back or contact the sender. Use checks to see if the message has been absorbed. And that can be done by asking some questions in an audience. In an email, it can be done only with maybe junior staff who are reporting to someone just for assessment purposes. Communicate positively. What do people think? How did they respond to your message? Collect and analyze data to optimize future communication. This can be sometimes obtained through informal channels. After sending out messages or a meeting is over, there could be an informal conversation to check with somebody how was the meeting. And people might say that, yeah, it was good, but some points could have been clearer. So that gives indications about how things were. In summary, communications there was a two-way process. The next one is we are all communicating all the time. Even when we aren't talking or writing, body language, gestures, tone of voice, even by omission. For example, leaving someone out of an email or meeting is also a communication that we don't want them in that email or meeting, meaning they may be irrelevant, for example. Some authorities claim that nonverbal communication is the most important aspect of all communications, meaning the body language. Then comes the way of speaking, the movements, the gestures, etc., and the words. Though the words are important, however, in certain situations, non-verbal may be more important, particularly when there is a argument or a real debate going on. Then watching the body language can be useful. Be aware of your own communication style and how it affects other people emotionally. This is the difficult part. A person who is communicating a lot has some influence on the listener, so there should be awareness of this. Think about other communication techniques you could try. Just leading you to a reference on communications. There are, of course, several materials and books, bestsellers available on communications, but this is one which is recommended generally in the communication skills programs. Messages, the communication skills handbook. This is a comprehensive and quite advanced. It is not about the basic communication, but the various factors in different situations. It includes not only office communications, but also more formal, family, and all kinds of environments. So it's a wonderful book that way. It's more like a reference than to read one time and keep it. The next principle is timing and frequency matter. Good timing is essential. Communication must be proportionate, relevant, appropriate to the time. Understand business periods when there is high activity and priority. Some examples. Don't bring up a minor issue in the middle of a major incident. The timing matters. Send customer satisfaction surveys after major initiatives. That is a good thing to do. When there are no initiatives happen and sending a survey may not be okay at that time because there's not much happened. Don't over communicate. Just send the right number of messages. Get close to your customers, form a relationship. Good communications lead to good relationships. One more principle, there is no single method of communication that works for everyone. We all have preferences for sending and receiving information. Even in learning, some people like to learn on their own, or maybe through audio, or through video, or through reading books, physical copies. And same goes with the other types of communication, reference to a social media platform or a phone line or a video conference or a face-to-face. Know who you are communicating with to select how to communicate. Even if we can't always do this for every person, it's a good guide. Because people have preferences, they may appreciate when the communication happens in their way. For example, if they prefer face-to-face, then it will be ideal for them to do. Consider alternate options for both message and the form. Many business cases fail because of poor communication, meaning the way the message is structured and the way it is presented. The message, the content itself, and the way it is structured. Whether it is too detailed or too short, and whether it is summarized or it has proper sections and so on, can make a difference. And the last principle is the message is in the medium. Format and nature of a message can determine emotional response. This will affect the level of importance, interest, and understanding. Select format, style, size, and medium to improve communication. So it's about the format and the nature. Use communications to help build relationships. Use relationships to help improve communication. So both go hand in hand. Relationships and communications can help each other. So this principle and the previous one might appear similar, but they are actually not. The previous one is about there is no single method of communication that works for everyone. Different methods. And this one is about the messages in the medium. Again, with the same person, the medium being used can also create a different impact. With the same person, an email medium versus the face-to-face medium can create different impacts. But depending on situation, different mediums would have to be used even for the same individual. Next is about establishing effective feedback channels. Communication is a two-way process. It's not something we do to stakeholders. It's not something which is done, but something which happens. Listening can often be more important than talking. Everyone needs to actively solicit feedback from stakeholders. Feedback channels should be available, known, easy to use. Unless people know where to give feedback, they may want to give feedback and they would be frustrated if channels do not exist. Consider using email, social media collaboration tools. Consider the type of feedback and the need for privacy or anonymity. Some people may not want to disclose who they are while giving feedback. There are different benefits of using different channels. I won't be reading through all this, but just highlighting to you the various ways. There could be one-to-one, face-to-face, or group meetings and workshops, or telephone, or email. These are the various ways of providing feedbacks. The face-to-face group meetings and telephones are direct contact, whereas the email is a remote contact method. While the one-to-one group and telephone are real time, the email is a delayed response or delayed message. Interaction is high in the first three, the one-to-one face-to-face or group meetings and workshops and telephone, whereas email, the interaction is moderate because it is not fully interactive. Each one has its own situations for use. There are some more, like instant messaging, social media, and graphics. All of them are remote methods of communication. While graphics is more like a delayed one, it can be sent in a media somewhere, but social media, instant messaging are more like real time. Therefore, the interaction is low with graphics, whereas the others, social media and instant messaging, is more is a higher level of interaction. There are many other ways as well. It can also be by example. For example, leading by example. Or record keeping, workflow applications for collaboration, or storytelling method, or reports. These are ways of communicating, and through these ways, feedbacks can be obtained.